Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, Eclectic Album Reviews and General Musical Meanderings. Very happy to see you here in my first preview for 2021. Even if this doesn't quite hit with the new year, this is going to be stuff that I'm going to be listening to for the next couple of months. And I'm really excited about all this stuff because this is what sets the stage, the background, the standard for what I'm going to be listening to throughout the course of all of 2021. It's like the big hit during this time, my post-Christmas listening. So there'll be several of these in a row going up until probably the beginning of February. So let's go ahead and get it started. The first one is Untitled Rise by Sault. Last year, Sault's Untitled Black Is, for me, kind of didn't quite get a fair shake. But I wanted to rectify that this year by starting the new year with Rise because I really think that Sault is a fantastic band that has a whole lot to say. And I actually think that Rise in some ways, as great as Black is, I think Rise is an improvement over that album. It's a much more richly instrumented album. It still has this really great cross between like R&B and Afrobeat and West African style pop music. But this one also has a little bit of more of a 70s disco nostalgia feel that pops up from time to time on it, which makes it seem very festive.
I've got to say that laughter heals the pain.
So I really, within the first seconds of listening to this, was like, this is going to be a great standout album throughout the course of this year. And my family loves it from the beginning to the end. It's a great thing about Sault is that even though they're a band with a very deep political message, they are very accessible and people like what they do. The music is very superficially groovy and fun. But like Terrence Blanchard was saying about last year, to listen to just the groove of this album is to not really understand what it's trying to say. Okay, next up is XTC's English Settlement. And again, XTC is one of those groups, I got into them way late in the game. It was probably the late 90s when I very first bought my very first XTC album. And I got into them because of the band Chomsky. They're a local band that I did a review on actually very recently. And they cited XTC as an influence. This was kind of at the crossroads when they were kind of about to become a studio project, but still had that energy of being a live group. So the songs are more ornate, more complex in their arrangements, and have a lot more variety within each one of them. They're not really straight ahead pop songs. Lots of really interesting licks and melodies they use in there, but underpinned with the really great, still energetic, frenetic energy that their earliest work had, especially when they did live. And this is the one that I always wanted to come back to. I've had it on my wish list for literally probably a decade at this point. And finally decided to go ahead and check it out. Okay, next is Jose Aponte's From Here, From There. Now, I have the great benefit of knowing Jose Aponte personally. He is a UNT professor. He's a really great human being and a great teacher and an incredible drummer. And so I was very pleased when he showed up one day and was like, hey, check out, I've got my album done. And handed me a copy, and it's a fantastic collection of Latin jazz. It's an album that's very personal to him. The songs were all written by him and by people that are close to him. And the members of the band that play are people that he knows well, both professionally and personally. talked to him about it. He's very proud of this and says it's very representative of where he is now, both as a musician and as a person. And if that's the case, then it reflects him very well, because I think very highly of Jose Aponte, and I think very highly of this album. If you're a fan of jazz or Latin jazz, good example of contemporary recording in that style. Okay, next up is Zara McFarlane, Songs from Another Tongue. She is a person trained in jazz, but I would not call Songs from Another Tongue a jazz album. Clearly she has jazz chops. If you listen to it, her vocal style and her attention to intonation is all, and her tone quality all comes from that kind of jazz study, that kind of training. This album was actually inspired by her taking a trip to Jamaica, an extended trip in Jamaica. She is of Jamaican descent. So she viewed this as kind of a trip back to the motherland, and she wanted to sort of get a grip on her roots a little bit. So she went in and did some very close study of Jamaican folk music and the rhythms and some of the melodies that they're using there, and didn't ingest it and regurgitate it, like steal it or anything, but definitely used it as inspiration for this album. And because of that sort of intercultural approach that she has to the album, it doesn't really ring out as like a jazz standards album. More like a contemporary, like neo-soul album, but with some kind of ethnic underpinnings to it. Okay, next is Machine Listener's Metonym. Machine Listener is the project of audiovisual artist Matthew Gallagher. And Gallagher is as embedded in visual art as he is in audio art. I mean, for him, these two things goes hand in hand. And so there's definitely a visual sense to Metonym. This album caught my attention early on because I really got a sense that there's a very intentional way in which he's constructing sounds on Metonym. The first opening track is several minutes worth of just like synth textures, so these very slowly moving envelope oscillations. But the way that the sounds are interacting, constructed and interact with each other in these envelopes is very intentional and very rich in the way that the sounds stack upon one another. Really beautiful glacial pace, meditative track. And then the rest of the album kind of takes off on this simple, subdued ostinato pattern that slowly is kind of taken over by this real super glitchy, chaotic beat. Really opened my eyes to how much I actually appreciate having a bit of chaos in my music. And the more chaotic it got, the more I was like, wow, this is great. Wow, this is great. It just kept on speaking to me. And it turns out that this album, even though it's relatively short, it's just under 30 minutes, covers a lot of ground, a lot of variety in the album, and a very aware use of timbres and the way that they fit together. Very contemporary, but also very classic. And finally, the Brendan Eder Ensembles, To Mix With Time. Now, this is an album that I'm always tricky when I put these things together because I don't know who's going to hang around to the end. Sometimes you want to put the best thing at the front. Sometimes you want to save the best for the last. So if you've made it this far, this is the album that's already setting the standard for 2021 in a really super compelling way. Brendan Eder Ensemble consists of Brendan Eder, who's the composer of this music. It's a drummer and a bass player and a small woodwind ensemble. Bassoon, clarinet, 2 clarinet parts I think I hear, saxophone, maybe a couple of flutes. And the best thing that I can compare it to is Frank Zappa's like early 70s crossover jazz rock work. It has that kind of feel to it. Beautiful arrangements with these woodwind ensemble, with those instruments. There's no other rhythm section, no other harmony going on besides what they provide. It's this constant rain of like melody and interlocking parts, beautifully orchestrated, but also with a lot of energy and a real playful nature to it. Think like Frank Zappa's Grand Wazoo, Waka Jawaka, that era of Frank Zappa's music, and you'll kind of hit close. And it's interesting because Brendan Eder is actually not a huge Frank Zappa fan. I think it's really interesting that he's come to this sound and having not really studied the work of Frank Zappa, because if you like that stuff, you will love what Brendan Eder is doing on this album. And I really can't get enough of it right now. It's really in the same way that Kate Davis impressed me with what she was doing on Trophy from last year. That's what I feel from this album right now. And it's going to be real tough for me to listen to something else and not judge it by the standard this album is set. Really great. Love this album. You should check it out. Okay. That's my first roundup for now. Again, there's going to be another one coming up next week from another 6 albums that I got from the holidays. So please tune in then. And if you like what you're seeing here, please like and subscribe and share it out with your friends. I've got a new Spotify playlist going up, the best of 2021 radio. That'll be happening. So if you follow me over on Spotify, please check that out. And next week, I'll come back with another roundup. And until then, I'll catch you on the flip side.